After a tumultuous year mired in controversy, backlash, and community discontent, Battlefield 5 has finally scraped onto shelves. However, all of the discussions and questions surrounding the game pre-launch have obfuscated the most important one: is it actually any good? Though it's been reductively dubbed as Battlefield 1.5 by some fans, DICE have made some pretty monumental changes to the classic multiplayer formula, opting for a more immersive gameplay style and a new attrition system, alongside doubling down on their single-player war stories in an era where most big-budget shooters are dropping campaigns altogether. And yeah, not everything works, but all of these tweaks and changes have admittedly made for one of the most interesting and undoubtedly the most divisive entries in the franchise yet. As mentioned, the biggest change Battlefield 5 makes to the core experience is the idea of attrition. Unlike in previous games, players now spawn with a limited amount of ammo, usually 2 to 3 mags max, and health doesn't automatically regenerate. Combined with an increased time to kill, which admittedly makes the lack of ammunition tolerable, the sequel is deadlier than ever, requiring more thoughtful approaches to combat than simply rushing objectives and firing blindly at enemies. And though this system was a little rocky in the beta, it's fortunately fully formed in the final release and one of 5's biggest strengths. It makes firefights more demanding, but it's also increased the skill ceiling. The simple act of knowing when to shoot that guy or to let the enemy in the distance scamper away adds an extra element of tactical thinking that has admittedly always been present in Battlefield, don't get me wrong, but which has been brought to the forefront here. Aside from making each match more intense though, it also puts the importance back on individual classes. DICE have altered each class radically going into Battlefield 5, leaving pretty much only the broad conventions of each one intact. The medic still provides health, and the assault still offers defense against vehicles, for instance, but the devs have made under-the-hood changes that ultimately make teamwork even more imperative and, thankfully, even more seamless. The medic, for instance, now has a revive syringe by default, with that gadget slot replaced with a smoke grenade launcher. Consequently, their weaker weapons are supported by this larger arsenal, allowing them to distract enemies by concealing friendlies in smoke while dishing out revives and all-important bandages. The attrition system also makes the support class more relevant, as a constant stream of ammo can mean the difference between walking into an objective armed only with a pistol or a fully stocked assault rifle in a pouch full of glorious grenades. It's perhaps the recon class that's received the biggest boost though. While the weapons and gadgets are mostly unchanged from the previous game, the fact that 3D spotting is limited across the board makes their spotting scope, and the fact that enemies are tagged after being shot with a sniper or suppressed means they provide vital situational awareness for your team that no other class can. Between these changes and the attrition system in general, teamwork is not only more important, but players are actually encouraged to help each other out without it feeling like a damn burden. One of the biggest aims DICE had going into the sequel was seemingly trying to make gameplay as immersive as possible, taking away or altering a lot of the gamey crutches players relied on in the previous releases. As mentioned, that meant 3D spotting was virtually thrown out entirely, with players now not being able to rely on the little red marker above enemies and instead have to track them with their own eyes. I know it sounds daft, but until it's not there, I had no idea how much I relied on it. Likewise, the devs have also put the focus on animation-based gameplay that ultimately keeps you in the moment. While that means you have more freedom over your movement and the chance to be knocked off your feet by an incoming explosion, it also means that reviving is now contextualized and you have to enter an animation to bring people back from the brink. This could have been a needlessly complex change from the simple stab your friend to bring them back in a second approach of Battlefield 1, and it is certainly more obtuse and prone to getting you shot in the back, but it's also a change that ultimately makes the game better. Sure, it's not as quick as it used to be, but physically having to grab players writhing on the ground and look them in the eye while you heal them as bullets whiz past your head is downright exhilarating. And as strange as it is to say, it actually makes you feel connected to the random people you're playing with and enables a real sense of camaraderie between your team. You really want to revive these people and make sure they're okay. There'll no doubt be people who prefer the arcadey elements from previous installments, but the new system is undeniably more immersive, and when it clicks, it's awesome. Although there's sadly only 8 of them at launch, most of the multiplayer maps are thankfully up to the Battlefield standard as well. Whilst the previous game seemingly made a few questionable moves towards a flatter map design with few interiors and little in the way of verticality, 5 thankfully hasn't furthered that approach. The very best of the bunch, like Twisted Steel, whose elevated bridge in the middle makes for intense back and forths as each team wages a war of attrition across multiple levels of elevation, have the same balance of play that the series' very best levels boast. Moving from interiors to exteriors, long engagements to short, all the while needing to check both above and below you makes for matches that always play out differently, even if destruction is sadly more in the background than ever before. As a whole, it's not the series' greatest collection of levels, as the bottlenecks of Aerodrome or the repetition of bombed out buildings in the urban areas can feel a little uninspired at times, but when you do get thrown into one of those great maps, they facilitate some of the most creative and jaw-dropping firefights franchise veterans will have ever played through. To dive into some specifics, in order to claw back some goodwill after dropping the ball completely with Battlefront 2, in Battlefield 5 EA have taken out loot boxes entirely, instead gaining customization behind company coin, a new form of currency that can be earned by completing challenges, assignments, and of course, leveling up. While still not a perfect system, the fact that you aren't grinding to earn currency to spin a gambling machine and hoping that you get something you actually want is admittedly a step in the right direction. There's still a wealth of personalization to Battlefield 5, whether that's in the camouflage painted on weapons, new character outfits, or the new looks you can give to vehicles, but now you can actually just straight up unlock whatever you want with the in-game points. Sure, you still have to grind a little to make sure you have enough currency, as some of the face paints in particular are weirdly expensive considering they're just a coloured smudge, but being able to use the fruit of your hard work to tinker with your soldier has brought back a layer of personalisation that so many multiplayer shooters these days have unfathomably locked off. Also, while we're singing its praises, at this point it should be a given that a new Battlefield game is going to look and sound amazing. DICE have done amazing things with the Frostbite engine and once again delivered a version of World War II that's hauntingly beautiful. However, there has been a few changes from the previous game which do keep things fresh. This time around there's far more colour as opposed to the mud, blood and metal style of DICE's World War I. And there's far more variation in the terrain, with dense, bombed out cities giving way to snowy mountaintops, colourful fields or dreary, broken bridges. Dynamic weather has also returned from Battlefield 1, which adds another unpredictable element to each match. Though much of this review and the focus of Battlefield 5 in general, may I add, has been on the multiplayer, war stories are also back in a big way and they're pretty damn good. Though there's only 3 this time round, they each feel more fleshed out and robust, with the same caliber of super serious storytelling that defined the previous World War I tales. Thankfully, however, DICE have improved the gameplay portion of these single-player campaigns this time around. Previous incarnations were split into pretty basic combat encounters that, without the overarching narrative, would have descended into tedium. Each level was always crafted around a single gameplay drive, which occasionally made the action feel a little jarring and disorientating, like it had been chopped up and pieced together from other content. This time around, however, each level and gameplay section is thankfully more coherent and varied. They're not perfect, and your mileage will vary in just how much you get out of the war is hell focus, but they are an improvement over those found in Battlefield 1. However, while it's relieving to see that DICE have upped their game when it comes to the actual meat and bones gameplay of their single-player campaigns, the actual narratives of each of these 3 war stories varies radically in quality. DICE's attempt to unearth untold and unseen conflicts that aren't usually highlighted in World War II media is indeed noble, but they don't tonally always come together. The first one starts things off on a particularly bad foot. It's all about cockney hard lads finding themselves in war, told through lush cutscenes and committed voice acting, bar a couple of dodgy accents admittedly, but the humour feels a little ugly, as does the transition into super serious montages. There are bursts of genuine emotion and inspired storytelling to be found, especially toward the end of that initial chapter and the majority of the second, but it's a very particular, very weighty, with a capital W style of storytelling that you either get on board with or revolt against. Also, while we're in slagging off territory, although it's not quite Battlefield 4, DICE's latest game is one buggy mess. Though I've not discovered anything game-breaking so far, there are plenty of little annoyances that completely tank the experience. Sometimes, for instance, when you first begin a match, the game can bug out completely and decide that neither the starting area or your squad mates are valid spawn points, leaving you lingering in the overview until you quit out and find another match. Other times, one day in grand operations will refuse to end, leaving you in limbo for hours, blindly racking up kills and deaths until everyone leaves. Also, this might be the same match of grand operations that disabled your controller vibration for some reason, leaving you to play the entire match without any rumble feedback. And of course, these are all on top of little visual hiccups like characters spawning in with no arms, or as low poly models that have the same face as Solid Snake from Metal Gear Solid 1. It's the kind of thing that will obviously be improved in time, but after the delay to polish the title, it's kind of frustrating to still have them drag the experience down. And it also adds to the general feeling that while Battlefield 5 isn't exactly lacking in content, after all, its 6-hour story and multiplayer modes can keep you occupied for weeks, it undeniably feels like an incomplete game. In part, this is because a lot of the features announced months ago, like the Battle Royale mode, are set to be rolled out over the coming months, while certain aspects of the sequel are proudly marketed as coming soon on the dashboard every single time you boot the title up. As a result, it feels like you're getting a lesser product at launch than if you wait and inevitably get it for cheaper further down the line. With a brand new war story, Battle Royale, Tides of War, co-op, and even the classic Rush mode not yet ready for inclusion, it's hard to escape the feeling that there should be more now. Likewise, although this might not sound like a big deal, it's kind of shocking just how much DICE continue to drop the ball when it comes to the user interfaces of each Battlefield game. While the devs thankfully added in the ability to customize your classes in the main menu rather than mid-game, although why they tried to insist on leaving this out is anyone's guess, actually altering these loadouts is needlessly time-consuming, forcing you to manually switch between Axis forces and allies. Don't get me wrong, it's good that DICE put in so many customization options, but it's a shame they made choosing said options so finicky that you'll probably ignore them to get into the action that bit quicker. This is all on top of them being sluggish as hell as well, with it taking longer to quit a match sometimes than to actually join one. And look, it's frustrating for me to get so riled up over a bunch of menu screens, but them being so poorly implemented does impact your moment-to-moment enjoyment of the game and adds to the overall feeling of the title being undercooked. But ultimately, Battlefield 5 is a solid experience when it's firing on all cylinders. With the best gunplay of the series so far and an interesting take on attrition, it does stand out as a compelling, if flawed, entry in the series. The confidence of the previous game isn't quite there, and having more content to look forward to in the coming months is both a blessing and a curse. But 5 is still a game worthy of your time and more than deserves a solid 3.5 out of 5. And the best thing is that rating can only improve as the year goes on. So that's what I thought about Battlefield 5. I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. Is it a worthy successor to Battlefield 1, or is it the first major misstep in a while for DICE and EA? Either way, could you give us a like, share, subscribe, and head over to WhatCulture.com for more lists and news like this every single day. Even if you don't though, I've been Josh, you've been watching WhatCulture, and I'll see you soon. Bye.